Good evening.
Wait a minute, David. Wait a minute. Got to get you on the screen.
Don't bother.
Oh, wait a minute.
I'm ready for my shot now, Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, we're just about to zoom in and say start looking beautiful.
Gosh.
One voice echoes round an empty
Right,
audience.
except Saturday.
Good evening and welcome to the recommencement of public education, something which began as an initiative by Ken Russell and which Colin Gibson ran with, and which perhaps we felt had come to an end with the end of their time as part of our congregation. I say public education, it's not particularly public this evening, but this is a welcome first step, and we expect and hope for bigger things over time. As is our practice, there is a bowl for donations at the back. The kohar will be given to a cause each time dear to the speaker that evening, and this evening's kohar will be given to help refugees in Gaza. I'd like to hand over to, I'm sure George needs a much introduction, but Donald has a formal job of introducing him, so I think we should keep to standards. So Donald, I'll hand over to you.
I like the story of the chairperson who you see at the beginning. Well, here's someone who needs no introduction and sat down. It's really true of you, George. You've been part of the Methodist family in this part of the world, more than just Mornington, but beginning on the Taieri at Mosgiel, where you grew up in a family with connections with Methodism, or your schooling was there. And then, of course, you came into the university to study, achieved your MA, and began, after time training in Christchurch to be a teacher, you began your long service to Kaikorai College, as it is now called, Kaikorai Valley High School as it once was. Largely confined, I wouldn't say confining yourself, I'm not sure that you can be confined, but music was there, history was always there, and a love of the English language, a good combination for someone who is attracting young students to take part in musicals, for example, where all those things come together. You had a second career, or are in the middle of a second career, at the university as a research person, a fixture, you might say, at the Hocken Library, working on initially the celebration of Anzac. I think all of us have heard George talk about it at some stage or other, but there is, I think, in these terrible times that we're living in, a need to remember that war, however unjust it is, has casualties on both sides. And it is good to remember that. And in a way, George, by the time that you've spent in Turkey itself, gave you, I'm sure, an opportunity to see the effects of war on what we, 100 years ago, called the enemy. So that's been a great part of your life. You were published widely and acceptably on that subject, but now you're looking, as I think I understand it, at the records relating to the service of members of the medical school and the dental school in both world wars. So we're privileged, really, to have a person with George's experience and wisdom and knowledge to be opening our Gibson talk series with an introduction for us to his work. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Don. I think you flattered me a little with why I published, but however, although a lot of people have picked up on my work in the PhD thesis. Thank you for accepting my invitation to come to this first talk of the 2024 series. This talk is going to be on commemoration, death and conflict. It's a privilege to be able to present some ideas on this topic which has dominated the headlines over the last decade and taken up a fair amount of my research time. I'm a specialist historian, as you've heard, on the topic of Anzac Day, for which I completed a 4-year study 16 years ago. But first, for tonight, a little bit of poetry. The lyrics of the famous Purcell song from Dido and Aeneas, Dido's Lament. The song evokes the importance of memory as a principal commemorative gesture. Dido's Lament, with music by Henry Purcell, lyrics by Nahum Tate, was written in 1688, the year of the Glorious Revolution, when the Stuart kings departed the British throne and were replaced by William and Mary of Orange. The year ended the reign of James II and ushered in a large change to the English monarchy. So looking at this song, why does Dido sing a lament at the end of the opera? In the storyline, Aeneas related the tale of the fall of Troy to Dido, the founding queen of Carthage, whom he falls in love with but dutifully departs to do more war service from Italy, leaving her. She was distraught by his betrayal of leaving, and she ordered a pyre to be built and set ablaze so that Aeneas would see from his ship that she had killed herself. In most accounts, she was the queen of this Phoenician city, the state of Tyre, and then, which of course is in Lebanon, but then fled tyranny to found her own city, Carthage, in northwest Africa. And in the background at the moment, you can hear the words, "When I am laid, and I am laid in earth, may my wrongs create no trouble in thy breast." And that's repeated twice. And then the most memorable verse is probably verse 2, or part 2, remember me, but forget my fate. And that is the most evocative verse coming right at the end of the opera. It's called Dido's Lament. And today in 2024, Tunisian women are frequently referred to as daughters of Dido. The second piece of writing comes from World War I, written and published in 1917. Wilfred Owen was to die in the last month of the war, on the 4th of November, a week before the armistice. He was shot by a German machine gunner near the French town of Ors while trying to cross a bridge on the Sambre Canal. Anthem for doomed youth. What passing bells for those who die as cattle. Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries for them now. No prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all. Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. This last poem gives a totally different view from Dino's lament. A reflection on who would remember the thousands who had died in World War I. Who will remember them? Or will memory be crowded out, pushed aside by the catastrophe of killing so many? The question arises, does individual memory get squashed by a major catastrophe? This catastrophe in World War I killed millions and left very few in the participating countries untouched. However, both the extracts point to a common desire that after death we all wish to be remembered in the minds of those who knew us. It is most clearly stated in the extract from Dido and Inez. We tend to focus on the wishes of relatives and friends of the departed, and tend in many cases to set aside the wishes of the departed one, except in the case when those people have made their wishes absolutely clear and usually written them down. This tendency to obscure the wishes of the departed exists not on a personal plane, but it goes as far as communities and nations. It is most clearly seen in a community or nation's response to death in war, when official uniformity of the commemorative gestures overtake personal and family wishes for the treatment of the departed. An example I can give you is in the Commonwealth War Graves Commission grave sites on the Gallipoli Peninsula. There was a maximum, I think, of about 20 words that was allowed for parents to put on, but most of the grave markers contain a statement of just saying the departed, we shall honour the departed. However, on a personal rather than community or national level, people turn to reminders of the lost one. This tradition is found in having keepsakes, such as photographs and pieces of treasured jewellery or ornaments, but it also extends out into the public arena for private burials in newspaper columns and or obituaries, plaques and tombstones, and some, for some very famous people, even public monuments. All of these memento mori, reminders of death, reflect the need by the living friends and relatives of the deceased to extend the living one's memory to and, as it were, to revive them. I wonder if we can take this feeling through gesture and keeping treasured objects a little deeper. I want to start talking about Jacques Derrida, an Algerian-born French philosopher. Lived between 1930 and 2004 and was called, when I went to university, a postmodernist with a certain degree of disdain. I think I'm reviewing the work of Derrida and his observations on death and fidelity that go to the heart of reasons for mourning. They also apply to people all around the world, and particularly those affected in conflict. There is one exception to that, of course, that he never in his writings referred to mass death. He was referring to personal, individual feelings. At the centre of Derrida's analysis and his word of mourning is the need of all humans to mark death with the process of maintaining fidelity and fulfilling responsibility to the dead. It is part of grieving which not only shows respect for the other, but also defines the person who is grieving. So there is a grieving person and a dead person, and there's a two-way process going on. So this is a two-way. By sharing grief and engaging in community gestures, we redefine ourselves. Encompassed in this definition is a realisation of mortality that conditions an understanding governing responsibility in all friendships. And I'm quoting now from Derrida. One must always go before the other. And there exists, those are my words, the possibility that one of the two would see the other die, and so, surviving, be left to bury, communicate, and mourn. And this is right at the centre of Derrida's analysis of death. He particularly looks at one person and their friend. The work describes how his concerns have been with the singularity of death and its inevitable repetition, what it means to reckon with death, all the dead, with all those who were once close to us, but who are no longer, as we say, with us, or who are with us, only so far as they are in us. That's coming very close to Christian theology and things that happen in many churches. Derrida ponders ways in which to maintain fidelity with the dead, to mimic or to take them to oneself, to identify with them in order to let him speak within himself, to make him present and faithfully represent him. Writing to a close friend, Roland Barthes, he asks, to keep it alive with oneself, is this the best sign of fidelity? He answers the question in the affirmative by describing happy memories brought forth by rereading Barthes' works, Writing Degree Zero and Camera Lucida, and appreciating the role of Barthes' mother. The role of the grieving mother is as central to Derrida as it was in the case of the dead soldiers in both world wars. Much in this way, soldiers who bury their friends who die on the battlefield read the letters of the dead and write to the parents of the dead, an act which provides valuable knowledge to the bereaved and places the writer within the circle of friendship. They act as a transmitter. And it was actually a function within many of the units who fought in Gallipoli to have a dedicated person in each division to be the writer. And that worked until that certain person died as well. Derrida identified the difficulty in bearing responsibility and maintaining fidelity, which comes on how to mourn and how to speak in mourning. In this way, Derrida's matter of interiorizing transcends the way we normally define memory. Memory of past events or of people in the past may change, may have integrity, but may preclude descending to the depths of interiorizing the other that Derrida takes us to. Nevertheless, in an unconscious way, that is what everyone does, who in return for remembrance and conversation, much in the same way as returned servicemen and women do on Anzac Day. In relation to the aporia, or the surprise at the paradox of death, it's a very difficult idea to explain. It's a Greek term where there's a shock at death, which is a paradox because we know for one or the other it was coming anyway. It's the conflict, and that's the paradox. Derrida argues this existence had been anticipated and prepared for well before death itself. Derrida persuades us of the presumption of death from the beginning of a relationship. That, of course, is very hard to take. That somebody that you have just met, or you have known even for a long time, may die before you, or you before them. And the absolute certainty of one partner leaving. That presumption is elevated during conflict and for memories associated with war. The central issue, again, to repeat it, for Derrida is for his dear friend's death, his fidelity. Without it, he finds there is no truth. This is a central issue for him, and a central issue for those who would attend commemorative ceremonies. In Anzac, the intonation, lest we forget, and we will remember them, are words which provide the raison d'etre for the day. But the intoned words are code for we will remember them and what they stood for, and that by in itself raises many questions. Did the original Anzacs stand and die for a common cause? For some, yes. For many, no. Are the reasons for their sacrifice applicable today? What happens if we have different values from the people who died then? Does Anzac Day represent our present values or those of the original Anzacs? Letters and diaries and records of family members about death of particular friends in conflict point to the validity of Derrida's particularity of fidelity, but handling the death en masse is most problematic. The problem is one of scale. Anzac Day commemorates the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands, a notion too hard to conceive for the fidelity of one. And true to Derrida, one could only more the death of a few. A nation could collectively mourn the deaths of its young, within community individuals mourn the example of a single or a few, whose death is extended to symbolise the mass. However, the deaths of many must be individualised, and that is why photographs, diaries, letters, badges, medals are such valued mementos. And Cam has brought a few of these along tonight, which you might be able to look at immediately after. And there's another piece on the table there. In the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, where the primary focus is on the community of the nation, it is the individual and family stories which attract and hold interest, not the various displays of pieces of wartime apparatus. The AWM is not just a temple to mass sacrifice. Its priests, the archivists and librarians are fully aware that the meanings of sacrifice can only be made clear by individualising memory. Here, viewers are encouraged to demonstrate empathy. To my persistent son. The librarians are fully aware of the meanings of sacrifice, and it can only be made clear by individualising memories. Here, the viewers are expected to show empathy. This is most readily achieved with the individual record or artefact belonging to the named individual. And the names are most important. Derrida does not address the problem of the missing dead. The scale and nature of the Great War left hugely legacy of shock in European and Antipodean societies, particularly for the French. While Derrida focuses on the individual's reaction, a question which arises is whether mass deaths are just a difference in scale and number, or are they a matter of degree and intensity? Do more deaths mean a shared grief is lighter, sort of like a mathematical common factor equation, or are the communities plunged increasingly into the depths of despair? To that, we must add the absence of the body. Derrida does not address the problem of absence, because all the friends he wrote for and for whom he made works in mourning did not die in war. Their bodies were present at funerals. Now, this does not challenge the validity of Derrida's writing, but adds another dimension where there is added tension because of the absence of the body. The shock or report of loss was driven home when the notification of death arrived, and then most poignantly with the absence of the body. Derrida's point of naming is relevant. Correspondence from the front often reiterates the name of the addressee, as though by repeating the name there might be more hope of the future. This represents proximity, that is closeness, no matter how far away the battle was from home. More significantly, names appear in the community, warm word inscriptions, and perpetuate the individual memory. It would seem that the procedure of naming or calling the roll of the fallen as in commemorative services bears with it a greater realisation of Derrida's first law of friendship than otherwise. There's a peculiar sense that the recall of the names of the dead or volunteers on the memorials in Australia, New Zealand, and elsewhere does give a sense of beating back death, as though the dead live vicariously. Derrida thinks about the implication of those who want to participate in the codes and rites of mourning. They're caught between two impossibilities: the impossibility of speaking and the impossibility of silence, absence, or refusing to share one's status. This has been a topic of a great concern for RSA in New Zealand, RSL in Australia, whether they go to Anzac Day parades and share the memories of the stories of the dead comrades or not. I have an uncle who used to visit us every year, driving out from Taupo until he was about 88. And he used to stay with us 3 or 4 days with his very small van, which he had turned into what you could only claim was some sort of camper van. Uncle Jim was a trooper who was a tank driver and ammunition runner in Italy. Dangerous in either circumstance, and he was made deaf by an explosion which happened underneath his tank. And he lost all his tank crew apart from himself. So, we've got to ask ourselves, with commemorative memories like the ones at Anzac Day, does it still, in this new century, carry the same sense of imperative? Not all returned servicemen and women decide to participate in the codes and rites of mourning. Veterans, as we are caught between two impossibilities: the impossibility of speaking and the impossibility of silence, absence, or refusing to share one's address. The same discussion has been shared by families and organisers of Anzac Day. Attendance and participation by men and women in the dawn service has a special connection with the feelings expressed by Derrida. Notion of keeping faith with the dead is axiomatic. The marchers and their comrades see themselves primarily attending for that purpose. It provides the rationale for those who cannot attend and the pain it gives them. The marches and parades are remnants of units. They are the remainder who represent the larger detachment or field reconstructions. Solemnity is appropriate for them because they do not march for themselves, but in memory of a larger group who departed to fight. So returned soldiers on the day reconstruct and forefront the memories and friendships of service in the years that they were away. I want now to talk briefly about photography and Susan Sontag, an American photographer, and history of photography. In the annals of the 19th and 20th century, human tragedy is not unique, but photographed often. Photographic records of various days in New Zealand, Australia and Turkey provide a rich resource for supporting arguments presented in the work. Susan Sontag, in a 1973 essay entitled In Plato's Cave, comments in detail on the power of the photograph. She bluntly makes the point that while photographs are images and realistically they can be no more, they have the power to see pieces of the world. miniatures of reality that anyone can make or acquire. The ubiquity of cameras and photographs allowed a universal experience and accessibility which was apparent to the Great War soldiers as to his relatives and friends. Soldiers became tourists and proof of their trip over there to the Dardanelles, or indeed to Egypt, and photographing the pyramids, was found when they returned home. Sontag asserts the photograph contains or conveys a type of immortality. It is the power which allows the bereaved family members and friends to recall or even experience intense feelings towards the lost one following the conflict. Further, she claims all photographs are memento mori. Not only do they show us the past, but often contain symbols of death, fading flowers, a clock, or other reference to time passing. As such, they freeze the moment that can never be really relived. Sontag claims that photographs are the pseudo-presence and token of absence. In this sense, they provide very powerful presence found on mantelpieces and house chapels at the end of the war and after. Photographs are the externalisation and realisation of memory, where memory is housed in things. If there is a great store to be set in photographs, what function do they perform in mourning? J.J. Long, in a commentary on Thomas Bernhardt's 1985 work, Aus le Cham, makes clear the photographs of the dead serve a dual role, quoting Roland Barthes. Long powerfully defines the photograph as this image which produces death while trying to conserve life. This duality evokes presence but also marks absence. The ability of photographs to merge life and death, to override accepted boundaries, is what elevates them to the status of precious objects for the bereaved. It also explains why communities perceive them as a palliative to the hurt of bereavement and allow their publications in newspapers and periodicals. In the main, the photograph appears to act as an aid to mourning, allowing both revived memory and gradual forgetting. This happens, of course, in funerary chapels, Hope's, Gilliam's, Campbell and Sons out in Moscow. Cam's gone. Anyway, post-1915 photographic lists in the New Zealand Free Lions and the Otago Witness bear testimony to the need for individuals and communities to see images of the dead Anzacs and honour their sacrifice. They perpetuated memory. For the moment in time, all readers saw the sacrifice of the family and sometimes read a précis of the dead soldier's life. This extended personal memory, confirmed in a place in society and placed apart for successive generations to recognise. This community recognition created an atmosphere of shared grief where forgetting actually, conversely, could slowly begin. Photographs were held, Susan Sontag suggests, as unique objects which had, beyond the power of recall, an element of crossing boundaries, allowing an imaginative leap or connection with the dead. Photographs were still novel and intriguing in 1915 and remain engaging through the 20th century. For many bereaved, they are a talisman, warding off pain. Photographs provide a rich ground for future research. There are outcomes in the general idea about Anzac Day ceremonies in New Zealand, Australia and Turkey which show numerous photographs. A child wearing parents or other relatives' medals on the right-hand side of a shirt or jacket in an attempt perhaps to reconstruct the other or show people around about that there is a familial relationship between the wearer and the person who died. They are bringing to the gaze both relationships and deeds in the family. They are proclaiming more than association. They possess the ground of the deed, at least at that present moment. The attendance in children has had a mixed reception, but photographs have shown children present in many parades And I had as a footnote, it's a foolhardy RSA or RSL official who forbids the participation of children. And this happened in 2006 in Victoria. The RSL president on that day for the Melbourne Anzac Day parade decided that there would be no children in the parade, and it was an uproar. A day later, he changed his mind. Now I want to mention Vera Brittain, probably the most respected English writer on the issue of memory and death and friends. She shared Derrida's notion of the aporia of death after the death of close friends. I might show you a picture of 3 of her close friends. Letters are reread and photos scanned. Memorabilia left out, and the need to discuss the issue of death with the friends, many of whom were in a similar situation. Derrida describes these activities as part of the process of interiorisation, as part of maintaining fidelity. Because the presence of bodies in the deceased, Derrida's case, is different from the situation of bereaved families without the body, there seems to be a case for more intense feelings than he expresses. There are many cases of families coping with no hope of repatriation of the deceased's body. And that was the case for World War I and World War II, I think, for New Zealand and Australia. The need to remember and to mourn became so intense that withdrawal leading to onsets of periods of personal intense depression. This sometimes led to people being admitted to hospitals and asylums. There were such hospitals and asylums in New Zealand after World War I, both for psychiatric patients and for returned servicemen whose wounds were so terrible that they were not allowed to be seen in public. This practice was pretty universal after World War I and served to foster the image of forgotten ones. Now I stopped there. There are two matters that I want to just discuss briefly. One is there's a man called Samuel Saltzman who has a plaque in memory of him underneath the right hand, to the right hand of the main door of the St John's Ambulance building in Lower York Place. And it says that in 1934 he donated the money to build that building, the St John's Ambulance headquarters. Samuel Saltzman. A name worth remembering. He was a Dunedin clothing manufacturer, a Jewish gentleman, of course, who of course also donated the money to the Company Bay Home. One of the buildings was the Saltzman building. I think it might have been, I'm not sure, the administration building. He also donated large amounts of money in the period 1935 to 1940, and I sort of lost track of what happened to him after 1940, but by 1940 he had donated various sums of money to the Waipiata TB Centre, to the TB Centre associated with Oamaru, to the sum of £20,000. Now that, in those days, was a ridiculously large amount of money for a man who simply ran a clothing factory. I think his name should be remembered, Samuel Saltzman. And now the other mention I wanted to make was about the war in Gaza. So many people have died now in the war in Gaza. The majority of them Palestinian from that area, who would have been buried, the most of them buried with Islamic rites. But how many of them did not have the time to have those rites, to have a decent hold up, to be wrapped in a swaddling cloth, to have a carpet-like covering over them, followed by boards laid transversely across the body, and then earth put on top. How many of them? I suspect thousands. Not even given a decent burial. Many of them will not be remembered because all their relatives are gone. In the Jewish quarter, they're making a great play of all those who were attacked and or died. In the 7th of October, Hamas attack across the border into Israel. Most of those people who have died have been given reasonable funerals, and there will be memory to them. There seems to be a great imbalance here. A great imbalance. That is it. Thank you.
Say anything myself just at the moment. George, would you, somebody have a comment or question?
Yes, by all means.
I should forward it to you, but last year I went to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, Holocaust Memorial. I sent it to my niece, and one of the things that is, it creates the memory of those who died from various sources, and they send out little emails about a paragraph of poetry. I'll forward one of those to you to see how that's done.
They too have lost some people who they can't trace, including the ones who may have been captured in the mass attack, but it's even possible that their own forces killed them in the bombings. It is almost impossible with bombings, particularly with large projectiles, that can demolish a four-storey house and leave it in the street for all their hostages to have been saved. Have we any other questions or comments?
Just an immediate personal comment. It occurred to me, as part of my life, and the incongruity of it all has struck me this evening more powerfully than ever. In the dining room of my mother's family's home, where we met for family dinners and Christmas dinner and something like that, there was a corner dedicated to my mother's eldest brother, who had served in Gallipoli and won a medal for gallantry, went to Western France and was killed at Fleur. He was, at the moment of his death, crawling across a field with his younger brother, another of my uncles, and the next day, after the shelling had stopped, the commanding officer said to the surviving uncle, "You can dig his, if you like, you can bury him." And the incongruity of it was that it was the room where we had the biggest family celebrations was the one where we turned our back on a corner which had Uncle Bert's medals, Uncle Bert's letter from the Minister of Defence. That's the person who wrote a letter to every parent who had lost a son, or their son, or daughter maybe. Other memorabilia. That's in this matter of memory that you started with and continued with. I see now how we can sort of live with opposites. In fact, it's the only way we can live with opposites. George, thank you. That's been an outstanding beginning to this series. For me, its importance lies in the fact that you chose to give us an analysis, a reflection, a deep reflection, share your wisdom on questions that are as lively, if not livelier, with us than they have been for years and years. 2024 and 2023 for that matter, of course, not years that maybe future people will want to look back on and remember. the threats are there. So at this moment, using particularly the writings of Dever, I suppose particularly, but others, to remind us that we need ourselves to think deeply about what death actually means is important. And I would like to think that as our Gibson talk series continues, we will always have an opportunity, or we will maybe as nearly as possible always have speakers who get behind their topic. So thank you for that. It's been, for me, a memorable occasion, and I'm glad, though there are a few of us, it's a start, and we have to make a start, and we've done so. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Might I also say that Professor Peter Matheson will be taking the next talk in May and talking on ageing and spirituality, which many of you will find, I think, very interesting. He's a very good speaker.
George, I was just reminded with Donald's comment, I'm named after Mum's brother who was killed in the war. And I've often pondered, how do I live to keep that memory that was handed on to me?
Well, I share the same thing. My name, George, is from my mother's uncle, George Hyde, killed at Branoster Cop, also called Rietfontein in South Africa. Not that I remember it precisely, on the 29th of November 1900, whose remains now have been reinterred from Branoster Cop to Diamond Hill Cemetery in Pretoria. Might I say, the South African Monuments and Graves Commission have done a far better job at letting the family know what happened to Uncle George than ever we could find out from the New Zealand authorities. They regarded him as sort of a bit of a hero, but of course, one rather dead hero.
Sorry, just as George said, I brought some badges and things. These belong to my Uncle Ted, whose real name was James Edward Jenkins, and he came from Arrowtown. Anyway, for some reason when he passed away, he left these to me. And probably the most, I don't know if anybody wants to look through them, but the irony of the thing is, somewhere in here there's some badges with stars on them, which I presume is Turkish stars from Turkish badges. But if you find one, if you turn it over, guess where it's made? London. So it's just trying to explain what these are. If you want to have a look through them, it's quite a range there he collected back in World War I. Anyway.
I mentioned that I'd like to show you a photo. Here is Vera Brittain, the British writer in 1914, who was busy just after that writing Testament to Youth. Of Youth, thank you. Her fiance, Ronald Layton, the middle of these three here, these three layouts, one of whom was her brother, and the other was their mutual friend. All three killed on the Western Front. She had a brooch, a red ruby brooch, that used to sit on her tall boy, which was struck by the sunlight at certain times. And she felt it was some sort of memorial for him, that it represented the best of him for her. And her writings are really wonderful. I think she wrote 3 of those books. I think I might have them all at home. But really